we've seen so many businesses go through early stages, growth stages, scaling stages, and all of the rest, that we know, and we've seen over and over again the challenges that every business goes through, and all the businesses go through similar growth pains. They're not different necessarily to everybody else.
Welcome back to 40 Minute Mentor, the podcast on a mission to raise aspirations and inspire the next generation of category-defining founders, all in just 40 minutes. This week, we're doing something a little different. I'm joined by my brilliant colleagues and fellow managing partners at the Amplified Group, Andrew Richardson, Dr. Andy Meikle, and Anouk Agussol, for a special roundtable episode. As many of you know, JBM is proud to be part of the Amplified Group, and together we support some of Europe's most ambitious companies, helping them navigate through the often messy world of people, talent, and culture so they can focus on growing. And in today's episode, we're going to be unpacking the questions we're hearing from founders every day, from early stage blind spots to tricky leadership calls around performance, exiting employees, and navigating the UK's employment landscape. These are real questions leaders are asking us right now, and we're sharing the honest answers we give behind closed doors. So whether you're building your first team, evolving your culture, or just trying to do the right thing while scaling, we hope this episode gives you clarity, confidence, and practical takeaways that you can run with. Let's get into it.
A big warm welcome to my wonderful business partners, Andrew, Andy, and Anouk. Thank you so much for being here on 40 Minute Mentor. This is going to be a thrilling and entertaining conversation, I have no doubt. I thought before we dived into the questions, we could just do a quick round of introductions just in case our 40 Minute Mentor listeners have not come across you before. So we'll do ladies first. Anouk, do you mind telling us a bit about your background and your role within Amplified Group?
Sure, I'm going to start with the letter first, if that's okay, because I like spinning things on their heads. I'm Anouk. I am a co-founder in Amplify Group, along with these three amazing people. I am also the CEO of Unleashed, that is part of Amplified People Group. And the focus there is very much on management and leadership development, really being able to supercharge leaders to be high-performing themselves, to drive high-performing companies. But also as part of that, I work very closely and as part of the Foundation Partners team, also part of Amplified People Group, working directly with clients on all things people and culture as well. So that is what I do from a background perspective. I've been in people and culture and leadership for the best part of, I hate to admit, 20 years now, but predominantly in tech or tech-enabled businesses, supporting them to scale. And that's just what I love to do.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And Andy, I think Anouk and Andrew have already been on the podcast, so this is your debut. Welcome.
Yes.
Can you do the same, please? A quick intro.
Big moment. I've been a watcher up until now. I'm Andy, probably the third or fourth co-founders to introduce themselves as a co-founder of Amplified Group on this. Also operate as CEO of Foundation Partners, which is our fractional people and talent business within Amplified Group. I have been, similarly to Anouk, in this game for 20 years now, working in people and culture and talent in almost exclusively founder-led businesses, often tech and often tech-enabled as well.
Amazing. Thank you very much. And last but definitely not least, Andrew, over to you.
Cheers, James. So I'll kind of background, do the opposite to the others and do background first. So I kind of three major areas to my career: commercial director for a recruitment and talent consulting business, co-founder of a venture fund focused on seed and early Series A consumer tech companies, and then COO for scaling a technology company called Napo. And then, back in 2023, founded Amplified with Andy and Anouk, and then James 6 months later. So the role I play is kind of twofold. One, kind of CEO of the group, which is mainly focusing on finances and growth through acquisitions, growth through business development, and also a managing partner of Foundation, where I play a kind of embedded chief people officer role for a few early stage technology companies. So that's me.
Fabulous. What a start. We're going to dive straight into some meaty questions. I'm eager to hear all your thoughts, and we're going to keep this really free flowing. So I'll see who comes in first, but we'll start with a question that I think will help our audience that are first time or early stage founders. So what are founders typically forgetting about in those early days of starting a business, especially when it comes to all things people and talent? Who would like to kick us off?
it's either going to be like all diving in or all shutting up and being very polite about it. I'm going to dive in before I get cut off by one of these two.
I was just about to cut you off.
Yeah. So the consistent thing, and we do a lot of office hours for like VC-backed 1000 companies through VCs and obviously with our clients as well. And one of the things that, like, a question that I ask very often, and I get like, oh, haven't even thought about it response, is just like a really, really high level definition of what like performance means to them. They just haven't, even as co-founding 2 or 3, or it might be the first 10 employees or whatever it is. I'm asking, it's okay, cool. So how do you define what like really good performance is in your business? And they go, I haven't done it. I haven't even had the conversation. It's kind of like, from my perspective, that's almost the first conversation you have, right? You've got to be aligned on what you both think about as high performance. You're about to go build a company that could be thousands of people, being aligned. And understanding it may change, but I'm always like, oh, you don't have a view here. I always find that quite strange. And I then actually end up spending the next 20 minutes figuring out, advising them on how they go about that. So I don't know what you two kind of see, but that's definitely the one for me that I just, every time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I think from my perspective, it's even a little bit more broader than that. You know, when you're an early stage founder, you're so busy building, you're so busy once you've built enough trying to sell it, and you're very in the moment. And for me, the one thing that gets left behind, which is actually, I think something that's really important to do at the very beginning, is thinking about the future. And I know that sounds quite wild and quite big when you're kind of so busy and active, but you will get busier and your challenges will get far more difficult if you haven't stopped to think. And I'm talking a couple of hours worth of conversation. I'm not talking about elaborate plans, to think about what you want to look like, what you want to feel like, what you want, you know, how you want the business and the people to be working, because that helps you make hiring decisions faster. It helps you make organizational structural plans faster. It helps you be able to do performance management better, performance enablement better. So it's just having a couple of hours thinking about what the future in 1, 2, 3, it doesn't have to be 10 years, might look like for you and what you want it to look like.
Great advice.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I think for me, it's the difference between whether things have happened accidentally or deliberately. And to both of your points, is sometimes a founder will be like, yeah, our culture is great, or everyone's really good. I've hired the people I know and trust already, and now things are operating exactly as I'd expect them to. But if you're like, actually, but do you know why? And is it intentional, and is it designed well enough that you'd be able to continue to do it or scale it? Often the answer that comes back is, well, kind of. And I think a lot of what we find ourselves doing is taking the good thoughts and the good intentions and helping getting them down to a point where they are defined and codified enough that people know what good looks like and know what they're looking for. And that helps everything throughout the employee life cycle of, you know, as an accessing the way that we're designing the organization, the way we're bringing the people in and selling the business to them at the same time as building something that's going to scale at the pace and get to where they want to get it to.
One of the things that Anouk made me think about just then is I often kind of make people realize whatever time frame they're in right now, it's the easiest it's ever going to be. So if you're a small business, now is the easiest it's ever going to be. It's just going to get harder. You're just like, you're going to raise more money, or you're going to have a bigger team, or you're going to have bigger revenue, or you're going to have more products, or you're going to have, you know, whatever it might be. It just gets harder from now. So these are things you want to sort out now because it only gets harder. I think it's a lot of the time they kind of haven't made that realization because it is hard at all stages. I'm sorry, I'm not saying it's easy right now. What I'm saying is it just gets harder. And I think people just don't realize that.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's so true. It often gets kicked down the road and then you create this monster. It's much harder to do retrospectively a lot of these things. And we see that all the time.
I think between the 4 of us, as well as the rest of the amazing Amplified Group team, I think we've seen so many businesses go through early stages, growth stages, scaling stages, and all of the rest that we know, and we've seen over and over again the challenges that every business goes through, and all the businesses go through similar growth pains. They're not different necessarily to everybody else. Yes, the context might be different, but what they go through is the same. So being able to think about those things early, what's going to come and how do I mitigate against those potential challenges so that I can achieve my aims, is just really important early.
Yeah, very, very well said.
Just on that kind of, it only gets harder. It's one of the things that I highlight to founders, and I'm sure we'll talk about some underperformance cases later on. But if someone is underperforming, consistently underperforming now, I think you've got a really big decision to make straight away, because it just does get harder. And often there's a lot of, I'd be interested in Andy and that's point in this. And this is where we could get into a nice little debate, but it only gets harder, right? And so when you've got someone underperforming right now and you've taken steps to help them improve and drive clarity in where they need to and all this sort of stuff, they're still struggling. One thing that will help you make a decision on what to do is the realization it only gets harder, and this person is finding it hard right now. And I have a lot of conversations about that.
Yeah, definitely. So you'll have seen lots of examples where people have not thought about this and then probably suffered the consequences of that. But you'll also have seen or helped founders think about this early enough. And it's then had a really important knock-on effect to the growth of the business. So do you mind sharing any examples of where you've seen this done really well, and what particular things founders have got ahead of that have made a real meaningful difference to the sort of growth of the business?
I used to work very closely and still work closely with a VC who invests in seed stage businesses. And one of the things that I used to do with them on a regular basis, as soon as they made the investment, they were introduced to me, the founders were introduced to me. And at the time, because it was such early stage, it was typically the 2 or the 3 founders. They may have had 1 to 3 other employees already, but often not. And we used to spend time at the very beginning actually going through their values as a founding team, or their individual values, and thinking about how did they want to work together? How did they want to grow the business? How did they see, and this goes back to my future point, how did they see it? Because then we were able to really take those and distill them into very strong values that started to set super clear expectations already at the point for when they were hiring people, for when they were onboarding people, and throughout that employee journey that they were able to do from the outset. And a lot of the feedback was, we've not spent any time thinking about this. They discovered quite a bit about each other in the process as well, which made a huge difference to how they work together. And as we all know, founder relationships can be great at the outset, but can lose some of that as time goes on as well. So really, being able to do that. And I did that with about 10 to 15 businesses, and they were all able to hire people quickly, onboard people well, and really go through that early stage trajectory post-investment really, very well.
I think that the consistent theme is when you work with a founder who is obsessed with setting the right expectations for someone coming into the business and to the business, and is committed to communicating that, makes everything so much easier, even if they haven't perfectly kind of codified their culture and values and got everything to that point. It's very much, if someone's walking into a business and it's like, this is my business and this is my vision for the business, this is what I expect from you, and this is what good looks like, and this is what not so good looks like, and here are my weaknesses, by the way, and here are my blind spots. As much expectation setting as possible for the entire organization and for people coming into that organization, I think I've seen as a real good predictor of kind of scaling success for an early business and for a founder.
Fixer, who last year they did an accelerator in the US focused on AI, and there was some principles out of that they all agreed were like, this is how we need to build for the foreseeable future. And they were like, it was kind of relentless work ethic. It was relentless focus on results. It was a relentless focus on just doing, not overthinking. And when we started working with them in December, there were 4 people, and they knew they were going to grow quickly. And we just embedded those principles into absolutely everything. We've had the 30, 35 people for them in the last 3 or 4 months. And every last conversation we've had with someone is we've tried to scare them off the roll almost and said, look, this is what it's going to be like when you come in. And then when you come in, as part of onboarding, every week they talk about these principles of how they're building. And it's just really ingrained early. And this is a business that's gone from 1 to 10 million ARR in 6 months, 4 to 35 people in 5 months. Like, it's just a raise from top tier VCs. So I think just coming back on aligning on those principles earlier, and then just really easily embedding into everything you do. And I'm not talking like deep structures. We're talking about me here, right? No, we're talking about like high level mental models, high level principles of when we talk about this and how we talk about this. And it's really powerful.
I think so. And I think that there was a period of time where everyone got kind of obsessed with places being lovely places to work. And actually the best places to work are the honest ones, where it's like, well, this is what you're coming into, and you can opt in or you can opt out. much more effective than convincing someone to come into something, and when they turn up, it's like, that's not what you've told me it was. And so I think, massive believer in, I worked for a recruitment company many years ago where the CEO was like, that's my Bentley outside. Yep, it might annoy you to be generating the revenue that's going to make me drive a nicer car earlier than you, but that's the structure that we're working within. And if that's okay for you, that's fine. If it's not, then don't. And it just created, whilst you had to opt into that kind of thing, it created something that was really, really pure, because everyone knew why they were there and they knew the environment that they were stepping into.
Yeah, and I do agree on, I think there is like a shifting understanding, and like anything politically and socially kind of goes in roundabouts, right? There's kind of waves of focus and then, or defocus. And I think we're into a phase now where like, it's not about beanbags and free lunch. It's about, well, to build something truly spectacular, it's going to be relentless, and it's going to be heavily focused on results, because if we don't do that, we won't grow, we won't raise money, we won't achieve what we want to achieve. And it's just about that honesty. And I think a lot of founders are still shying away from it. I think they still are trying to be like, this is a work. Like I saw, I think it was Mark Benioff quote on LinkedIn earlier, which is, when a founder talks to me about the fact they've created a well-balanced structure, I know they're going to lose. And that's, Mark Benioff, as in founder of Salesforce, right? Like saying that probably doesn't invest, and he's actually invested in Fixo. So you can kind of see the ties there. That's quite a good person to go off, having done hundreds of investments, built one of the largest businesses in the world.
These are all great points. And I guess to echo that, I think when the best clients we work with, and probably where the best talent wants to work for, is where there's absolute clarity from the top down of where the business is going, what the values are, what it's actually going to be like to work there, and complete transparency as well. And so you know what you're expecting, and therefore you have your expectations managed. And then if you buy into it, brilliant. I just think that's just such an important thing for a leader and a company to buy into.
I was just going to say, you have a concept of authentic and inauthentic jerks, very much to kind of what we were talking about there, that it's very easy to hear the words of an inauthentic jerk where they are telling you what you want to hear, everything sounds great, and then you go in and work in that business and it's completely different. Worse than it being completely different, it's inconsistent. So one day it might be good, the next day it's terrible. What you did well one day is awful the next day. And everybody would much rather, if they had to work for a jerk in inverted commas, they would much rather work for an authentic one who knows they are, who says how it is, who this is how it's going to be here, this is how we're going to work, this is what good performance looks like, this is what I expect, this is what I won't tolerate, and know where they stand. And I used to talk about that a lot. There are also the authentic and non-authentic nice guys as well, I'd like to add. It's a proper quadrant.
This episode is sponsored by Foundation Partners, part of the Amplified Group family. Foundation Partners is reinventing how ambitious early-stage companies access people and talent support. Typically, when it comes to people and talent, founders take one or two routes. They try to manage it all themselves, which comes with huge opportunity costs compared to focusing on product or go-to-market, or they hire a generalist, expected to cover everything from culture to recruitment to performance. Foundation Partners offers a more impactful alternative, a fully flexible fractional people and talent team with specialist skill sets and hands-on delivery that starts driving impact in just 2 weeks. So if you're building something ambitious and want the right people and talent support behind you, don't go it alone. As a 40-Minute Mentor listener, you can book a free 1-hour advisory call with a managing partner worth £500. Just head to www.foundationpartners.co.uk/contact and mention this podcast. Now, back to today's 40-Minute Mentor.
I know there'll be people listening to this that are probably dealing with right now tricky people and HR decisions as a founder. It can be incredibly draining. I myself, particularly from the earlier days of JBM, found this the most stressful part of knowing how to navigate situations you just never come across and you don't want to get wrong. So, question to you three: are we held back by the current employment law in the UK? And what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think so. For me, at least, it's a fairly good balance. I wouldn't want there to be at-will employment where you can say, there you go, take your box, you can go, but nor would I want a fairly unionized thing where it takes a really long time to have a conversation. I think we're quite there in terms of balance, being able to have reasonable conversations with people about where it's going and where it isn't going so well in a way that is fairly protective of the employee as well.
Yeah, how do you think about the 2-year rule kind of being scrapped, I suppose? Because there's a part of me that feels like, does that get the balance the wrong? I feel like the only people who win in that area are the kind of employment lawyers. But
Well, I mean, you shouldn't unfairly dismiss someone anyway. I think if it encourages people to be kind of reasonable and fair and appropriate on both sides, and I think that's good. And if it encourages better discipline internally in terms of making sure that you're assessing the right people where they're coming in and you're giving people the opportunity to improve, then I take your point that it makes it a little less easy than it has been previously. But I think that's just an adjustment thing that companies need to get used to. But employment lawyers will win. You're right.
They always win, yeah. I think, I don't disagree. In fact, I agree, but I come at it from a slightly different angle. I think employment law is there to really exists for the most vulnerable employees to be protected from the worst kind of employers. And I think that's why it exists, to be honest. I think, and in that vein, sometimes what it can do, if the intentions are good from employers and from employees, if they're malicious, then it's a different thing. But if the intentions are good, then what it can sometimes do is inhibit just proper adult human conversation, because you have to write a letter, you have to say this, you have to say that in order to be keeping in line with the law, when actually that can sometimes inflict more stress and more pain than being able to have a proper conversation. But there are, again, when the intentions are good, there are ways to be able to stay within the law and to be able to have those conversations and to treat people as adults, and to end, if it's an employment law, if it's a performance related piece or a capability piece, to be able to end that relationship, relatively amicably or whatever it might be. Sometimes it feels restrictive to be able to have proper conversations with people where there is good intent, but it exists, and I believe it should exist in order to protect the most vulnerable from the worst.
Yeah, well said. It's probably a great segue. One of the hardest things you have to do as a founder is letting people go, which I know you three will have lots of experience of doing it in the right way. But for a lot of people listening, it might never have had to do it before and probably are very uncomfortable doing so. But it is something you have to learn and you have to get comfortable with as you scale, because it is just part of entrepreneurial life. So what would you say to any founders listening to this that feel very guilty and really deliberate on these sorts of decisions? How can they get over that? And what is the best way to let someone go in a way that's fair and like best practice?
one thing I'll add, I don't know if I'm the best person to take it first, but one thing I will add is there's 55, 60 years of HR experience between me, Andy, and Anouk, and we still hate it. We still find it horrible. We still find it super hard. We still talk to each other before we need to have these difficult conversations for our clients or with our clients or whatever. Like, I think for a founder to feel guilty or find this hard is totally normal, and it probably will never change. So it's getting comfortable with that kind of slightly uncomfortable thing. As soon as you find it super easy, something probably has gone wrong. And that's a different thing for me.
That's exactly what I say to all founders and leaders that I work with. The day that you find this easy to do, or you want to do it and you're quite excited by it, is the day you should no longer be a leader in a business. It should never be an easy or a comfortable thing. To some extent, depending on how you've gone about it up until then, why they need to come out of the business, if it's a redundancy, if we're talking kind of firing for performance here, rather than, there are lots of different reasons to be exiting people that might come with different feelings. But if you've hired badly just because you want to hire someone super fast and get a bum on seat, and you've really not thought about it very much, if you've not onboarded them well, if you've not given them any time to support their development or help them kind of with what does actually good performance actually mean, and you've woken up one morning and you've decided they're going to have to go, actually perhaps you should feel a little bit guilty, because you do have a duty of care as an employer with these things. And I would hope that you would learn from it next time around, because if for no other reason, and I would argue the reason that they are a human being and they have a livelihood to earn and they might have family and all of the rest, but if for no other reason than for business reasons, it's very expensive for you to do that. If you're hiring people, you want to make sure you're setting them up for success, because just replacing them because you're going to fire someone, it's expensive for a business, let alone the human impact of that as well. So there's an element where you should feel guilty. That said, if you have done the best you possibly can and it's not working out, they will feel it, you will feel it. It's probably not pleasant for anybody. Then being able to have a conversation about that, as hard as it still is, it's probably a positive thing for everybody in the end, including that person, especially if you're supportive on their way out.
So yeah, I'd agree with everyone that feeling guilty or not feeling pleasant about it is fine, and you have to kind of sit in that. And I think looking at these things as it's a decision to make rather than a problem is also kind of helpful. But ultimately, it's a relationship that you have with this person, and like with all relationships, at the end of them, and many of them do end, if you can leave knowing that actually, well, I knew what I was walking into, and yeah, this person was honest with me, and they set the expectations at the beginning of this relationship, and things haven't gone as I hoped they would. It's very, very rare that, as Anouk says, you're not going to get to the end where one person thinks it's a wildly different experience than the other one. Generally, as long as you're being honest and communicating well to your employees and to your colleagues, you get a sense that it's getting to the end. And I think, yeah, being fair and reasonable, whether it's redundancy, whether it's a performance conversation, is the absolute minimum that people can expect. But
yeah, I've got a couple of principles that I kind of could try and communicate at this point. One is it should never be a shock to the individual, right? Like, if you're letting someone go for business reasons, for misconduct reasons, for performance reasons, it shouldn't be a shock. If it is a shock, you could have done things better, I think, is probably the dynamic. Sometimes you have to create a shock, and that's fine, but you could just still do things better. So is this a shock is one of the questions that you should always answer. And human beings hate shocks, have a really bad response. And secondly, it's always your fault. This principle, like, you have hired that person, you have onboarded, you have managed that person. Like, if they are not right for your business, it's your fault, and that's okay. But making sure that you realize that is really, really important when you're letting someone go.
Yeah, taking ownership for it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you've hired them, right? You've managed them up to that point, whether that's 3 days or 3 years, you've still been their manager.
Yeah, all brilliant points.
I'd agree with the no surprises side of things, and that applies from day one as well. That's a probation period conversation where it's like, well, you should know. There should be no surprising conversation at the end of a few months where you're like, well, actually, I thought this was going swimmingly, and you're telling me something else. So there has to be absolute commitment to that.
And it comes back to this theme of clarity of message, transparency, open communication. I think if you lead from the front with that, and you're going to have less issues when it comes to this sort of thing, because there's no doubt if you want what is always going to be a difficult conversation to go better, it's much better if it's not going to be a surprise. Whereas if it's a surprise, that is going to be a whole messy situation to deal with. So I think our audience will really benefit from that.
You can get nearly everything wrong, right? From a recruitment perspective, from an onboarding perspective, you can get everything wrong except absolute clarity what they need to do. Like, everything else you can kind of get wrong, and you can still survive, and you cannot get, this is what it's going to be like, this is what you need to achieve, this is what you need to do to pass probation, this is what you need to do to perform in my eyes. That's the only thing you've really, 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 really got to get right. And you should spend an incredible amount of time trying to. The rest you can actually get wrong and still find a solution, I think. Maybe not everything, but like a lot of things, most things.
Thank you very much. I guess from firing to hiring a brilliant people leader can be game changing for companies. But if you've never done it before, it's hard to know what good looks like. So for anyone in this situation that's listening to this, what should founders expect from a people director? And for those that maybe have never hired one before, how do they actually have like meaningful impact and add real value?
I've done quite a bit of I've done quite a lot of exec search in this space. And one of the things that I kind of believe in is, you, like with any leadership hire, you just, at the beginning, you take the functional role out of it, right? So it doesn't matter whether it's a marketing director, people director, tech director, you take the functional bit over and just say, okay, it's a director of the business. And what do I really want from a director of the business? And the ability to understand what's going to happen in the future and build accordingly, the ability to build an exceptional team, the ability to set exceptional goals. These are the things that I think just you've got to expect from any director. And I think people seem to kind of slightly dampen that when they hire their people director for some reason, when actually go back to core principles. They're a leader of our business. What do I want them to do? I want them to be able to challenge, and I want them to be able to set exception, but I want them to be able to predict the future, hire an incredibility. And that's the bit that I go back to always. And then overlay that with, okay, what do we need in a specific role and skill sets and all that stuff.
Obviously, AI is here to stay, impacting the world of work like we've crazy speed in many positive ways. So I'd love to hear your take on this topic, particularly any advice you have for our listeners who are struggling perhaps with how to switch to an AI first culture. So given Andrew is Chief People Officer for Fixer AI, one of the fastest growing AI businesses out there, maybe you can take this one first.
I think about AI adoption in a few ways. So there's a kind of like mental model and structures. So the mental model by AI adoption for me is quite simply, one is the only way you're going to get people to adopt AI is if you do two things. One is you give them the skills to actually use it. Most people are just saying, hey, be more AI, please, and then go and get on it. When actually it's more like skills around how to prompt, skills around what workflows AI can actually help you with. Like doing a load of focus and a load of training around that is absolutely like, you have to do it. Otherwise they just won't be able to do it. Won't be able to kind of take on that message. The second thing is, and you've got to be, this is a kind of dangerous, you've got to be quite careful here, but I talk a lot about stretching the system, which is in two ways, which is, okay, I can't give you more resource here because of X, Y, and Z, like financial or time or whatever it might be. So you're going to have to figure out how to use AI. So you've got these two things, which is give people the core skill set to be able to actually do something, and then stretch the system. That means that they've got no other option but to try and adopt it. And now you've got to be careful with stretch the system, right? Because you can stretch it too much and you don't achieve anything, you break confidence, people leave, etc. So you've got to be careful. And I'm not saying that's like the route in always, but if I'm thinking about it, I'm asking those two questions, right? And then there's some structures that I've seen companies really embed. Like one is like hiring gets scrutinized in it, and it's aligned to stretch the system, I suppose, but hiring gets scrutinized in a completely different way, which is, I want to hire this person. And yet you have to answer why this can't be done with AI right now. You have to be able to answer that question as a leader or as a manager. If you can't answer it, you've got to go back and figure out why. And then you've got to present back. And I think that's one of the key things here is, why can this not be done by AI? And that is a structure that does two things. One is it makes people really research and really think about what can get done. And two, the chance of you over hiring just reduce massively from there. So those are the couple of things I'm thinking about. What's really interesting, and maybe Andy can speak a bit more about this because I think he's closer to the specific client, but we're now starting to see org designs with agents in it, which is a complete, like, that's the first time, right? That's so interesting, working with companies who are now going, okay, well, it's this person plus this agent. That's my org design. And I think we'll see a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Really good points. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the AI fluency side of things. So rather than, I'm sure if I search for AI, I'm sure there's a company that has been created in the past 3-4 months that will help fix this for me. You have to be able to operate it internally. So that's super important. And there's obviously a sifting through this seemingly endless array of businesses that seems to be answering your question, but there's so many of them. I think there's definitely a question there, but it's the kind of internal commitment to doing it properly, I think. So whether it's, well, every time you come with an investment case of anything, there has to be an AI option there that I can compare it against. So internal structure, if someone's asking for a headcount, it's like, well, what's the AI version of this? But we're seeing a client that is, well, we're not even going to consider that. We've got 3 people on our org chart that we're going to train AI agents to do this, and we're not going to start with a person and then do that. We're going to start there. And I think it's the not dipping your toe in, but if you're in a position to do it, a higher risk, or let's do this properly and let's do it at the beginning. I think same as when people are doing data science. Didn't work in lots of organizations because people were building data science departments rather than embedding data science across organizations. And whilst this is far more widespread, I think it's that there has to be a degree of commitment internally where you are, I need the AI alternative to doing it the way that we would normally do it. And let's be kind of bold in trialing these things, because I think we'll see that a few companies will really just get it early on.
Yeah, totally. Company-wide adoption is key, isn't it? And actually, but also then supporting, because there's going to be a lot of skeptics, but actually I think once you feel empowered to do it, use AI effectively, and it becomes part of the everyday, like it will make work hopefully, and businesses run so much better and more efficiently, and hopefully be more enjoyable. Anouk, any final thoughts on this topic?
Just that I would perhaps argue the premise that every business needs to be AI first in their culture. Certainly AI is very important in businesses and being able to supercharge, whether it's doing something better, whether it's doing something faster, whatever it might be, but AI first. I'm not quite sure that every business, some do obviously if they have an AI product, but it has to be like that. That said, I think in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of businesses dramatically change their structure through mass, or not even mass for some businesses if they were smaller, but through redundancies. And what hasn't happened is the loss of people doing work being replaced by any form of technology or AI support. And we've seen the people that are still left in those businesses having to do two people's work with no support of how to improve that. And that's kind of led to dramatic increases in tiredness all the way through to exhaustion, through to burnout, without rethinking and recalibrating. Okay, now that we are fewer people structured differently, but we still need to achieve what we needed to achieve, if not more. How do we do that? And how do we use AI to support that? And I think that's what every business needs to be doing at the moment.
Wise words. Thank you all so much. This has been a really insightful and enjoyable conversation. And I'm sure the first of many. There's so many more topics that I really want to dive into, but we've run out of time. So thank you all so much. Really hope our audience have benefited from that. And there'll be lots more actionable advice and mentorship to come. So thank you for joining us. I'm sure you'll no doubt hear from Andrew, Andy, and Anouk again another time soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I really hope that you found it useful and inspiring. If we have left any questions unanswered, or if you have any feedback or guest recommendations for future series, then please make sure you get in touch on info@jbmc.co.uk. I often get asked by listeners how you can help us spread the word about 40 Minute Mentor. There are two simple ways you can help. Firstly, share this episode on your preferred social media platform, and LinkedIn is probably where I'm most likely to see it. And you can also leave us a review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Every share on social media and review left on the podcast platforms really helps us to get 40 Minute Mentor in front of new audiences and share the power of mentorship even further. Thank you so much for your ongoing support, and I look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday for even more pocket-sized mentorship.